So HANA database sizing. First, focus on database sizing. Next, we'll discuss some other things. So always when we are speaking about sizing, which is basically a process of identifying the hardware requirements of a customer. That's how you can define it. It's a process of identifying the hardware requirements for a customer. That's what we can term it as sizing. It's not at all a new thing. It's a pretty old concept we have in SAP. But here, requirement is we want to have the sizing done for HANA-based deployment scenarios. We don't know. We may come across anything. As I explained you, there may be different deployment scenarios you may come across. Like example, you may be using HANA as a data mart. So when you're using SAP HANA as a data mart, we don't have any application running on top of HANA. Or maybe another situation you're running BW on HANA. Maybe another situation you're running ERP on HANA, REST for HANA. So we don't know. It can be anything. So the first and foremost thing what you need to do is if you are a person already know a little bit about SAP sizing, as an approach, first and foremost thing you should do is you should get the guidelines and recommendations given by SAP, and that you need to refer to always. And even before that, what you need to understand is sizing is not completely relied on one person. It's actually a collaborative work between SAP, the customer, and the hardware partners. So it's not just about one. Uh, Everyone is having some role to be played. Yes, that's kind of work. So if you don't have that communication properly between the customers and hardware vendors and SAP, and utilizing the information they're providing, it will be very tough for you to perform the sizing. What the meaning of that is tough in the sense it will lead to a lot of issues tomorrow. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to make it sure that customer doesn't run into any performance issues. At the same time, you need to keep the TCO as low as possible, the total cost of ownership. So that big factors for you. So that's why always the first and foremost thing you need to do is you need to consider that information what SAP is offering to you. SAP's role is that they'll give you a lot of recommendations, guidelines, and all that. Because this is not a process which you perform by following some rules. There's nothing like rules here. No one can define rules saying that okay, this is what the rule you need to follow. It's not like that. So basically, SAP will provide you the recommendations and the guidelines. So what are those guidelines they're providing to you so that you can refer to? Example, say if you go to help.sap.com slash HANA platform. So database related sizing guidelines they'll give you here. It's a HANA platform 2.0 SPS2. See on the right hand side, reference they're given. A lot of reference documents will be there. Under this reference, if you click on view all, so here SAP is giving you the HANA sizing note. So you refer to those notes depending on the deployment scenario. As I mentioned, they'll give you different notes for your references, which already I projected here. If you go to this presentation, you can find it clearly, so which I mentioned, which one you need to refer to, and that will have that updated versions, latest version, latest applications information also will be available to you. So always refer to this as a central note for you. as far as sizing is concerned, HANA sizing is concerned. This one 1514966 is the sizing note what you need to refer to generally, and from there will be links to a lot of other notes also depending on the deployment, maybe ERP, S4, whatever it is. So there they'll provide you a lot of information for you, very useful information, and they also given a link to QuickSizer for SAP HANA, because you know that QuickSizer is the traditionally the tool which people are using when it comes to sizing your SAP solutions, which they are using from way back, almost from 1996. They are using it. It's a pretty old tool, but one good thing what SAP has done is right from 2014, they started offering this QuickSizer in two versions. QuickSizer, we have classical version. That is, QuickSizer classical version is for SAP solutions with RDBMS. Still, if any customer is implementing SAP solutions like with RDBMS, like they want to run ERP with Oracle database, ERP with the DB2, or BW with the DB2. So those kind of situations, you can use that classical one. Now, any SAP deployment scenario with HANA database, like as I mentioned, that HANA is a data mart, native HANA solution, or maybe S4 HANA, BW and HANA, all these things. For that, SAP is offering that HANA version. So you can just get an access directly using this QuickSizer for SAP HANA. Direct access. Directly will take you to that. Nearly 35,000 projects every year. The sizing is done there. With your customer ID, you can create a project, sizing project, and providing the inputs, you'll be able to do this. So even though there are so many different approaches available for sizing, this is one of them. Quick sizer based on the users and throughput, you'll be able to do the sizing here. There are approaches also, like even some customers they may follow with simple t-shirt sizing also. It depends. I mean, different approaches. So if you look at the sizing, the main the KPIs, the sizing KPIs, what we call them as, are this: the memory, CPU, the disk I/O, along with the disk size, and the network loads, the front-end network loads. So this is standard. In that, memory is the leading driving factor for HANA sizing, because you know that in HANA database, the primary storage of data is memory. So obviously, that memory is the leading driving factor as far as doing the sizing for HANA-based deployment scenarios. The CPU also is also crucial, because parallel processing is one of the biggest feature in HANA database. So obviously, that's also very very important. But the major leading driving factor for you is memory, and usually based on that memory only they'll choose those appliances. Usually based on that memory only they'll choose even the cloud environments also. Okay, we'll see. We'll try to identify how to identify these memory requirements for a customer. We'll come to that. And before getting into that, so there are some universally applicable statements on sizing. Remember that. These are all general statements. It's not just specific to HANA only. So those facts you need to remember. First, what they mentioned here is 20% of the transactions and scenarios create 80% of the load. That's a fact. So identifying that is so important. The 20% of transactions which actually generates 80% of the workload. So generally, you see most of the people doing mistake. Actually, they'll focus on that remaining 80% of the transactions, which actually generates only 20% of the workload in the company. The second thing is the reliable sizing can only done with scalable software and hardware. Anyhow, software giving that scalable software is the responsibility of SAP, and hardware scalable hardware is the responsibility of the hardware vendor, that certified hardware vendor. Anyhow, that's not at all a problem, particularly when it comes to HANA, because the HANA database software given by SAP is scalable, as well as the hardware provided by the vendors, the certified vendors, is also scalable. But the only thing is, as a customer, choosing the right kind of hardware is very important for you when it comes to the scalability. Because for some of the customers, ultimately at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to have the low TCO and better performances. So you need to plan it properly, and choosing the right kind of hardware is also important. That's where these hardware vendors will be helpful for you. Okay, so then the landscape and configurations are related but separate tasks. So meaning of that is, when you're speaking about landscaping, it's not just about one single HANA database and HANA appliance is sufficient for you. Because when you're speaking about doing a new implementation, it's obvious that you have development system, test systems, production systems. You need to plan for everything. All these are related, but they are separate tasks. What are the configuration requirements you have for the production system is not same as the configurations you need for development. Even though all these three are related, but they're not same. They should be considered as separate tasks. That identification. So these are all general statements what we have. Universally applicable statements we call them as. And coming to the next point, we have some risks in these sizing projects. So what are those risks we have in sizing projects? So one of the biggest risk we have in the sizing projects is incomplete input data. So getting the sufficient information from the customer is one of the biggest challenge. So because usually it will be affected with your communication issues, often caused by communication issues. So in such cases, what you do is, because we don't have sufficient data available, usually you rely on the assumptions. You do some assumptions and you try to rely on the assumptions. So that's where the problem comes. It's perfectly okay to work on the assumptions, but you have to ensure that a verification process is included in the project plan, a proper verification process, and more importantly, this must be documented. అప్పర్ లిప్ ఏంది ఎట్లా అవుతుంది? స్వెల్ అయిందా?
కిందకి కొట్టుకోవచ్చు బయట
యాంటీసెప్టిక్ లిప్ బామ్ కాదు.
టాబ్లెట్స్ కూడా పెట్టచ్చు ఇక్కడ రామా ఉందా లేదా ఇక్కడ రామా ఇక్కడ రామా ఇక్కడ రామా ఇక్కడ రామా
చాప్డ్ స్కిన్ నాట్ లిప్స్.
అబ్బా
యా
డాడీ అట్లా అట్లా నేనట్టు ఏంటి డాడీ
సౌండ్ కూడా వినిపిస్తుంది. డాడీ నీకు సౌండ్ కూడా వినిపిస్తుంది అబద్ధాలు.
అశ్లేష తర్వాత ఎవ్వరేడు
అంటే ఏంటో
మరి లక్కీ బాబు
ఇంకా క్లాసా
ghost. They will haunt you.
Daddy, who was the
తీసారా
president?
మరి?
Who was the president
Why do it?
in? Who was the president in the um, 15, 2015? 2015. Who was the president?